Watch them grow. I dream I know. Deep are my feelings for you. Watch them grow.
Hello, now everybody can hear me. Welcome to Coffee and Conversation, and I am your host, Underground Media. And I just want to say thank you, everybody, for tuning in tonight. We have a very, very special uh, presentation this evening as I'm having some technical difficulties. Okay, much better now. Sorry about that. We have a very, very special guest with us this evening, Mr. Jeff Schoep. He's the founder of Beyond Barriers USA. And I'm going to play a short video and then we will come back and I will introduce him to you all. And we're back. I believe so. Yes, we are. We are back. And with me now, as you all can see, is Mr. Jeff Schoep. Jeff Schoep is the founder of Beyond Barriers USA. It's a 501c3 nonprofit organization committed to a new approach of countering and preventing violent extremism. From 1994 until early 2019, Jeff Schoep was the leader of the largest neo-Nazi organization in the United States, the National Socialist Movement. In March 2019, he became the highest profile former white nationalist to ever walk away from far-right extremism in the USA. Since then, Jeff has been an outspoken advocate against the ideology that he had been part of for 27 years, making him uniquely qualified to understand extremism and extremist ideologies. Jeff now works as an international extremism consultant, helping to educate communities and policymakers on the threat of white supremacy and how to effectively counter and prevent violent extremism. In addition to public speaking, he also provides consulting services and leadership skills trainings. Welcome, Jeff.
Thanks for having me.
Well, thank you for agreeing to come on such short notice. I appreciate it very much. Now, on my channel, on a lot of conversations and coffees, we've talked about extremism and the work that I've done with Beyond Barriers as well, and the work that you do. And I just wanted to give you an opportunity to come on and talk a little bit about it and everything. So first, I just wanted to ask, I know you get asked a lot, to tell your story and things like that. Is there a way to give maybe a brief overview of your story? Because I know you probably get pretty tired of telling your story because you're more than just one thing that I always say is that we are more than our story. Like everybody has a past, everybody has a present and a future. Hey, Wale, thanks for joining us tonight. Would you give us just a brief, what got you in and what got you out?
Well, it's a if I'm going to do a condensed version of my story, let's shoot for that.
You don't
So
have to do a condensed version if you don't want to. I
well, we'd
mean,
be on
we've
here all
got,
night long if I
but you know.
don't. So anyways, so I got started in far right extremism or neo-Nazism actually at a fairly young age. I was intrigued by it or interested in it, since as young as I can remember, and I had wanted to join a group like this for a or a group like I was involved in for a very long time. And by the time I was 18, I joined the National Socialist Movement, which was a continuation of the movement of George Lincoln Rockwell, the original American Nazi Party. So it was a old, very well established organization. And unfortunately, I spent the next 27 years involved in that. By the time I was 21, I was appointed to run that organization on a national level. So I spent about 25 years as the national leader of that organization. So as far as understanding extremism, understanding nationalism, neo-Nazism, the National Socialist Movement became the largest organization of its kind in America by the time I left. I left in early 2019 and work now to help other people get out of those type of movements. And as you said in the intro, basically try to help people understand this lifestyle and try to make better choices. And in society in general, and this, you have to bear with me a little bit.
It's all
I
good.
had another event. Excuse me. I was speaking all day long today, so if I'm losing my voice to the listening audience, that's what's going on here. I spoke this morning at an event out of the nation of Georgia, and then it was one thing after another today. So let me explain where I left off there. Basically, having spent that amount of time in an organization like this does uniquely qualify me to understand a lot of the drivers, a lot of the factors, why people get involved in these type of things, and how we can get them out. And when I got out of that organization, I had planned to speak out. I'd planned to talk about my experience and what I could do to help people. Because when I joined that organization, and this is something that a lot of people don't understand, because you have this narrative out there in the public, and everyone wants to say it's about hate, it's about hate, it's about hate. Hate is fostered there. Hate is developed in these movements. That's the truth. That's a fact.
Mm-hmm.
Very, very few people join these movements based on hate. And our research and the things that we've worked on, we've helped develop research for Rand Corporation. Their research proved it, and the research we're doing in-house at Beyond Barriers is going to prove that as well. When it's finished, I guarantee it. So I had heard different people talking about this and saying, well, I was filled full of hate, that's why I joined this. I thought, man, in 27 years and 25 years as the leader of this organization, of the largest organization of its kind in the country, only a handful of people over all those years that I had talked to that had told me, hey, I joined this group. Because we'd ask them. That was one of the things that we would ask new recruits. Why did you join? Different people would have different answers. Some, would say, oh, well, I joined because you guys are against illegal immigration. Or I joined because of this reason or that reason. Very seldom did we have those people that would say, I joined because I hate. So when I've heard some of these people talking out using that narrative, I thought, man, either they think they need to say that, they're being dishonest, they don't remember, or they fall into that small category of people that, and we did come across some, what I would define as sociopaths or psychopaths. If they're carrying that, if that's why they're joining. And I know as the leader of the NSM, when I came across those people that spoke like that, right off the bat, that was their reason for joining, they made me nervous, because I thought this person could be a liability. This person could be somebody that's going to be the next, shooter or something of that nature. So those people always made me a little nervous. They seem to be a little bit loose cannons and not people that would fall in line in under any kind of discipline structure or anything like that. So and I'm going off at a little bit of a tangent about
It's
it
okay.
here, but I think it's important, and the reason why I talk about it is because if the public misunderstands why people get involved in these things right off the bat, if what they're being told or what the narrative is, how can you fight it? How can
Right.
you understand the ideology? How can you break it down? And how can you reverse it? How can you
Mm,
fix it if you don't even understand why people are involved in this? So when I hear that narrative in public, it gets under my skin, and I will talk about it, and I'll keep talking about it, and I'll keep saying that it's wrong, it's dishonest, and it's not accurate. It's a
right.
very, very, very small percentage of people that join these movements based on hate. It's not accurate. And I'm going to keep saying it, and I'll scream it from the rooftops, because we are not going to defeat this ideology. We are not going to fix things in our society. We're not going to set the divide straight if we're basing everything that we stand for, everything we talk about, on a lie or a dishonest perception. And I want to preface that, or follow up, excuse me, rather than preface. I want to say hate is part of this. It is developed there. It becomes your reality, and it is fostered in these movements. But it is not a factor. It is not the driving factor that gets people involved in it. It's just not. And if in all the years that I was involved, I only saw a handful of people that that fit that narrative coming into the organization, I think that's pretty accurate. And like I said, the research now is backing up those things, and we can refer to some of those reports from Rand Corporation, and forthcoming ones from Beyond Barriers as well. I guarantee it's going to match up. So we'll see as it comes, but I'll let our research department talk a little bit more on that, because that's a little outside my wheelhouse.
Right.
um, I'm the spokesperson. I talk about this stuff. I talk about my experiences, and I work directly in disengagement and de-radicalization.
Now, I wanted to follow up because we do talk about how hate is not the driving factor as to what brings people in, but it is fostered there. Now, how do you fight the hate once it's there?
Well, a lot of times, where the hate comes from is, it comes from a place of fear, and again, that's something that people in the movement, and I know when I was involved too, even now, I don't like the word fear, because I feel like I don't fear anything, but and I really don't. But when you look at the narratives of the extremist movements,
Mhm.
whether it's far right, far left, religious extremism, any kind of extremism, typically um, they are motivated by fear,
Mm.
and I can explain that. For
Go ahead.
example, in the white nationalist movement, in what I was involved, what we were involved in the past, there was always this underlying current, or this concern that the white race was facing genocide, that the government was out to get us, all the other races were out to get us, the Jews were out to enslave us, and take over our country and take over, everything.
Mhm.
So if you break that down, what is that? That's fear. That's
Right.
fear. It's not, first of all, it's not accurate, but when you're involved in these type of things, that is your reality. You hear people talk about there's the truth, and then there's your truth. Well, when you're in the movement, that's your truth, and that's why it's very cult-like. It's very psychologically challenging. Like, you're inside a bubble or an echo chamber. Most of the
Mhm.
people that you talk to, they're all also in that echo chamber. That's the concept of Beyond Barriers. For those that are familiar with the message, they've heard me say some of this stuff before. But for all the new listeners and people out there that are hearing it, the concept of Beyond Barriers is that you've put up these barriers. You've done it to yourself. You've put them up in your mind, and you set them there, and you can't see beyond them. So you're trapped behind these barriers. You're in this echo chamber, and you can't see anything that's beyond that. You can't see the humanity of others. You lose track of your own humanity while you're in there, and all you see is the narrative of the organization you're a part of. So that's why a lot of times I'll say it's very cult-like.
Mm.
When I was involved in the movement, I kept hearing that from different girls that I was dating that were outside of the movement. One after the other, they would say, Jeff, this is like a cult. When they'd come to events with me, this is like a cult. And every time I thought, what is wrong with these girls? Well, there was nothing wrong with them. There was something wrong with me. I didn't see it. And nobody else in the group could see it either. But you could speak to that as well. I mean, it's very cult like. I mean,
could, but this is me interviewing you time, so I'll let you speak on it for now. I speak on it every week.
Right. You got it easy tonight then.
I do. This is let's put Jeff on the spot, and
Right.
Underground Media can take the background for the moment.
Okay,
But,
so it is very cult-like. I could
Yes,
speak
it
from my
is.
own
It
experience
is.
there. Yes, it's very cult-like, and it's very all-encompassing. So, even a lot of times when so we talk about their truth and the truth being different.
Right.
Yeah, it's very much like that. So I didn't like that reference when I was in the movement, how it was cult like. I couldn't see it. I really couldn't see it. And after getting out and processing those things and thinking about those things and getting away from it, you're able to process that a lot better. And I'd heard people say things like that before, stepping back. And that's why when we talk about de-radicalization and disengagement, our process is you should disengage first. We want the person to disengage from these movements, and then we work on de-radicalization, breaking down what the real truth is on different things, and helping them see things in an alternative manner rather than the truth or what they believe to be the truth. So with my own trajectory on getting out, I did it the opposite way. I was starting to de-radicalize while I was still in the movement, and that's highly unrecommended. That's not the way we do it. But in my case, it was a little bit unique and different in that sense, because I didn't have the support. I didn't have a really strong network of people that were helping me to disengage. I was having to figure a lot of this stuff out myself, and of course with some good friends and family and the little bit of support I did have.
I know I have mentioned several times in several different interviews how it was people such as like Dia Khan and Daryl Davis that helped you see. It was meeting people of different ethnicities and different religions and actually having interactions with them that helped you realize that you weren't so different. And can you um, elaborate on that just a little bit for our viewing audience?
Yes. There was quite a few different people, and there's a lot of them. I talk about Dia and Daryl more publicly because they are public figures and they're okay with me telling their stories. But there was other people as well, and meeting people here in the Detroit area, um, all kinds of different people. But meeting Daryl and Dia, which was really nothing out of the usual for me, as in the sense of I'll tell a little bit of each story. So meeting Daryl, I had gotten contacted by a documentary film crew. Hey, would you like to appear in this film? Basically they just told me a general overview of it. And normally, since I had done tons of documentaries and tons of different films and stuff, I would typically look into the background of the filmmaker or whoever I was meeting with to get a better idea, because a lot of times they don't want you to know all this stuff. So I wanted to be mentally prepared for it and all that. For whatever reason, in the case of the time when I went to meet Daryl, I didn't ask all those questions like I normally did and see who I was meeting with. I had no idea. And I'm sitting outside of this place. I think it was in Alabama. Yeah, it was in Alabama. It was at Chris's Coney Islands, which was a place that Hank Williams Jr. Hank Williams Sr., excuse me, used to hang out. It was like a music place and a hot dog place or whatever. And that's where we were having the interview. So I'm sitting outside, and a guy steps out of a vehicle and he says, "Oh, you must be Jeff Schoep." And I was like, "Who are you?" "I'm Daryl Davis." So, I guess you're the guy we're interviewing. I'm interviewing with today, And I didn't know anything about him. Well, at that point, when he had said who he was, I did recognize the name, and I remember hearing some things about him, but I hadn't done any homework on this
Now,
for this.
and you didn't know, and I don't remember if you saw this already or not, but you did not know that you were meeting with a black man, did you? Did you know Daryl Davis was black when you agreed to it?
No, that didn't matter because
I
I
mean,
met
not
with.
saying that it would matter, but I'm just saying for people watching and listening, like at this point in time, you had no clue that you were meeting with a black man or that the man that stepped out of the vehicle, like you just said, was Daryl Davis. So, like, you had no idea what you were walking into. All right,
No,
go ahead.
which was
Sorry.
very, very, very rare for me because I typically always knew who I was going to meet and what was behind the film, and I'd ask lots of questions. And for whatever reason, fate, whatever you want to call it, I did not do that. But it wouldn't have met even at that time when I was in the movement. I met with people of all different races for these films and things like that. That didn't really matter. And I know for some people in the movement, it would. They'd say, well, I'm not going to talk with a reporter of a different background, but I always did. That wasn't an issue for me
Right.
back then. So that wasn't really a big deal at all, even then. But it was when we met and we were having the conversation, and not just on camera but off camera. I mean, I really enjoyed talking to him. He was so smart. He's a famous musician, so and I was a musician before I was before I spent a lifetime doing this stuff that I was doing for the past 27 years, and what I do now, of course, working in disengagement and de-radicalization. But so Daryl and I were talking about music and different things, and this is a pretty cool little place that we met in because all the music history and all that kind of stuff. But what really got to me in his story when we were talking was he told me a story about when he was a child in the Boy Scouts, and he was the only black child in the Boy Scout parade, and how adults were throwing rocks at him in the parade, and he didn't realize that the reason they were doing that, he thought they didn't like the Boy Scouts. And when they had gotten him home to his parents sat him down and were explaining to him, well, Daryl, it's not that they didn't like the Boy Scouts. They were throwing those rocks at you because you were black. And he goes, no, that doesn't make sense. How can they hate me when they don't know me? And to this day, that's part of Daryl's mission. And Daryl is with us at Beyond Barriers, of course, for the listening audience that doesn't know, that may not know. He's an incredible human being. He's helped over 200 people himself walk out of the Ku Klux Klan and other
Jeff,
organizations.
I apologize for. I just wanted to say, William Troll commented on Facebook and said, "Love you, bro. Great work." So I just wanted to let you know that.
One of my brothers from before, and he's also walked out of that life. And thank you so much, and I love you too, brother.
Sorry for interrupting that.
I'm glad he's listening. Good man there.
So anyway, sorry.
Yes.
You were talking about how he thought that they were throwing rocks at him because they didn't like the Boy Scouts, and then realized that it was because he was black.
Yeah. And that bothered me. That really, it really got to me because I was thinking to myself at that time, like, I'm not letting on to it because I'm filming at the time for the movement. I'm thinking in my head, I'm going to do a good part for the movement. I'm going to say whatever I'm going to say today. And, but in the back of my head, that planted a really important seed that helped in my de-radicalization or my de-radicalization process, was reconnecting with one's humanity. So I was thinking about my own children at the time, like what if one of my kids had come home and said, Dad, some adults were pelting me with rocks. I'm not going to say on the stream what would have happened to those adults, but it wouldn't have been a pleasant situation. It makes me nervous thinking about how I would react in a situation like that. So I put myself in those shoes the best I could, or tried to understand that, and it started making me think, like, if this movement, and of course, when we were in the movement, we would, I don't want to say justify things like that necessarily, but we would make excuses for things like that. Like whenever there was a mass shooting or murder or something terrible that happened, and it hurts to even say this stuff now, but it's the truth. And I think if we can't get to the bottom of these things and we can't fix these things and be honest about these things, just like from the first thing I said in the show tonight about hate, if we're not honest about that stuff, we're not going to be able to fix these things. We're not going to be able to fix these divides in our country. So I'm going to be honest about it. In the movement, we would make excuses, not excuses, but I would almost say it's like
justify.
What?
Would it be a justification?
No, it's not a justification. It's like a coping mechanism where
Gotcha.
you say, for example, a mass shooter or something, and we would always go, oh, good. Well, not good, but oh my gosh, it's so good that person wasn't an NSM member.
Gotcha.
And if it was somebody that we knew, we'd always be like, oh, well, John or whoever, whatever name you want to put on it, John just went crazy. He must have went crazy. It was never, you know what? Maybe this ideology is driving people to do these type of things. Maybe this ideology is triggering really bad things in people, and that's why they're doing these things. It was never that. We never thought of it that way. It wasn't until after getting out and you're processing things and you're going, you know what? Maybe it is the ideology. I think it is. I mean, I definitely think it is. It's not that so-and-so just went crazy. And now I want to be careful with how I say this, because not everybody that's in these movements is violent, and they're not bad people. And I hope we didn't lose half the viewing audience when I say that.
No.
What they're doing is bad, yes, but they're not bad people. And there is bad people in there too, but I'm saying these are human beings. These are people that have made bad choices. They went down wrong paths. Definitely it's a wrong path. Definitely it's not something you want to get into. And as I said in the meeting earlier today, a lot of people don't want to hear this stuff because they'll say, you know what, nobody in my family would join a movement like that. I don't have that problem in my family. My kids will never get involved in that. My brother or father or whoever, nobody would ever get involved in that. Don't be so sure, because it's not, you can't label people and put them all inside a box and say, this is the kind of people that join the movement. It's just because they had trauma, or it's just because they were looking for friends. And I've heard this. I've heard academics talk like this. I know you have too. I've heard them say, everybody that's in the movement has trauma. That's not true. A lot of people have trauma. Yes. That have been in there, but not, and I think I know what you're gonna say, but go ahead.
Now, show me one human being in this entire world that does not have some sort of trauma. But so everybody in the movement has probably lived through some sort of trauma from one thing or another, whether it's big or little, but trauma is not the driving factor of why all of them got into the movement.
And for some, it is. For some it is. But yes. I've saw so many of these different things where they try to fit that in a box and say, this is it. Everybody's had trauma, and that's what it is. And you know what? Like you said, most of us have had some kind of trauma in our lives. Most of the trauma that I've had was in the movement, and because of my involvement in the movement. Mm-hmm. I didn't have all kinds of trauma or anything growing up. I grew up in a good family, with a good family and a good home, and things like that. My trauma was mostly experiences that I've had when I was involved in this. How many people I knew that died or harmed or killed other people, and friends being shot in the head, and I could go on. It's there's definitely some trauma there, but everybody deals with that stuff differently.
Well, speaking of trauma and in the movement, out of the movement. Sorry, cannot talk this evening. somebody got a question and asked, how hard is it to try to lead a new life after leaving the movement when everyone knows you were in a movement or an extremist group?
That's a good question. Now, for a lot of the people getting out, um, in some cases, they weren't that well known in there, and they could get on with their lives fairly easily. The higher profile you are, or the more well known you are, in those circles, the harder it is to do that. So in my case, being the national leader for 25 years, having done tons and tons of films and press and interviews and speaking at just about every state in the country and all that kind of stuff, for me it was incredibly difficult, because and it was one of the concerns I had, amongst many, from about leaving. I would make excuses, in my own head, basically saying, "Well, I can't leave now, or I'll leave next year, or I'll be leaving. I gotta leave," and then I just kept thinking of reasons to not go, or I can fix this, I can change this. I had this attitude of like, this is your bed, and now you have to lie in it. Like, this is the bed you made for yourself, and now you're stuck in it. And finally, and I hadn't even got into meeting Diakon yet. I don't know how much time we have, or
We
if I
got,
should get into that.
no, you're more than, we got plenty of time.
But let me try to answer the viewer question, first. Basically, it has its challenges. There was concerns, getting out, that and a lot of former extremists have these concerns too. Like, will they ever be able to have a normal life again? That was a big concern, and there was some concerns that I had, like that, because of as long as I was in and as well known as I was, that no one, in society, no one in civil society would give me a chance to have a normal life or anything like that. Um, I felt like I was at war with the system, with the world, basically, for 27 years straight, and that there would be no opportunity to get back into civil society and things like that. And when I was going through what I call like the decompression process, of after leaving, and just trying to sort out all my thoughts and things like that before I spoke out, because I retired at first. I retired from the organization, and I knew I was going to
No,
speak out, but I
I was just
wasn't
going to
ready.
ask you that. Okay.
I
Sorry,
wasn't
I was
ready.
just going to ask you that. If when you originally got out, if you knew for sure that you're going to speak out, but didn't know what path that would take yet. So that's why I was asking. I was just going to ask you, if you retired, was it because you were just retiring and thought you would just kind of go away, or because you knew you would speak out, but were not ready to do so?
I knew I was going to speak out, but I wasn't ready to do so. Coming right out and speaking out immediately, there's no way. I'm a resilient person. I heal fast. I think fast. I was in a high stress environment, especially as the national leader for 25 years. You had to make decisions that could cost people their lives, in the snap of a fingers. We were in dangerous situations a lot of times, where one wrong move, you could be dead, or someone else could be. So I'm used to a high stress environment. Even I had enough common sense to know that, leaving and going right out the door and speaking out wasn't I wasn't ready for that. I
Gotcha.
wasn't. So I didn't start speaking out until it was August or September of 2019. But I knew I was going to, but I wasn't ready to. And so when I retired, there was a lot of people trying to get a hold of me, and most I wasn't talking to, but there was a few people I had to talk to, because there still was uh, organizational business, that things I had to pass on to the group, and things like that didn't belong to me. So I still had to talk to a few people. And one of the individuals was saying to me, he was like, "The Jews will never forgive you. They will hunt you down to the end of the earth for you know being who you were."
Right.
what are you going to do with your life now, Jeff? And it wasn't coming from a mean place. It was coming from a place of concern. Like, really, what are you going to do? What are you going to do with your life? And I wasn't going to, say what I was going to do at the time, but I knew I was going to speak out. But those were some of the concerns I had as a human being. And the reason why I'm talking about that, or the reason why I'm saying that, is because I know there's people out there that are thinking about leaving whatever form of extremism they're involved in. It doesn't have to be far right. That's where our expertise comes from, but we have people that come to us from the far left, the far right, religious extremism, all kinds of extremism, cults, gangs, things like that. So the message and why I'm talking about that is because I want to tell those people, no matter who you are or what level of involvement you were at in these groups, if someone like me can change and start my life over, so can you. So you can do it. You just got to have the courage to walk away and do something else. And you don't have to speak out like what I do. Most people don't. I mean, we'd love to have you come and speak out. The more of us that are doing it, the more effective and the better. But you don't have to. This is a choice. And I know there's people that think it too. Like, if you leave, you have to. Someone's gonna make you do this or make you do that, and that's not even accurate. It's not. It doesn't work like that. So I think that answers the question.
Mm-hmm. I think it does. The other thing is that because people did know who you were and what you did, so it's not, even if you did go away, quote unquote, quietly, and didn't speak out, people would have still known your background. Like, do you have any advice? Say somebody's coming out of an extremist movement, we'll say the far right, as an example, just because that's the background you come from, and say they were doxxed in the movement. And so it's not like, even if they leave, they can't necessarily go away quietly, because there are people within the public and in the community, their community maybe, that know their background. Do you have any advice that you could give them upon leaving, as far as, like, maybe they're discouraged that if they leave, everybody already knows that maybe they were a white nationalist, maybe they were a white supremacist, in one way or another, they were involved in the extremism. Do you have any advice that you could give them? Because, maybe they won't speak out, but their community still knows. So.
And we deal with, unfortunately, we deal with a lot of those cases too. And I'm going to say, for the people that are out there doing the doxing, I don't care what side you're on. If you're doxing somebody, I feel like I can maybe I can say I can be a little bit more at ease to say what I'd really like to. You shouldn't do it. Let's just say you shouldn't do it. You shouldn't be doxing people, because doxing people hurts them. And typically, what you do when you're doxing people, you're pushing those people farther back into the movement. Every time I got doxed, every time I got punched, every time I was visited by the police or the feds or whatever, and pressure was put on me, I went 10 times harder into the movement. I just kept fighting. And every time somebody put pressure on me, I hit back 10 times harder in that sense. I mean, not in a physical sense, but in a literal sense, in as far as getting extreme and being involved in these things. So, I don't recommend doxing, and that didn't answer the question, but I really wanted to hit on that, because it's not good. And I know there's segments of society that talk about, oh, that's good, and we got somebody to leave. You know who leaves over doxing? I can think of about I could count them on one hand. First of all, they're not ideologues. They're not people that are deeply into this stuff. They're like those fence sitters, or the people that are kind of on the fringes, that are like, you know what, I might try this for a little while. Ooh, I got doxed, I'm going to leave. If that's what made them leave, they were never ideologically committed in the first place. That might have got them out, but that was just by chance. They might have tripped on the sidewalk and got out too, because they weren't committed in the first place. That's not a big victory. Getting somebody out that was an ideologue, that's a victory. So to answer the question about how that sort of thing can follow people, and how it can stay and follow them, sure, it can follow you for a long time, if especially if you're known, if you've been doxxed or you've been in the press or anything like that, it can follow you for a very long time. We know people that have been in. And I don't usually read the comments while I'm talking because it throws me off completely. But I see TM Garrett's in here, and I would like to use. And I know he won't mind, so I'll feel free to share a little part of what I know of his story. Another one of my brothers there. TM had been out for a number of years, and some media outlet had picked up. Found out that he had been involved in the movement, and he'd been out and away from it for quite some time already. And they decided they were going to run a story to tell his local community who he was, even though he explained he was out. It wasn't anything he left that life behind. Some media outlet decided that, I probably don't have the entire story, but this is the gist of it, that they were going to do that so the community would know who he was. And that's, we all make choices in life, and especially those of us that were in the movement, we know it wasn't the right thing to do. We made mistakes, and we move on. And one thing that I've heard from people in some of the communities that we harmed the most, people in the Black community and the Jewish community especially, and I specifically, a number of them, friends that I have in those communities, have come up to me after talks at different places and said, Jeff, stop beating yourself up over who you were. I said, I'm not beating myself up. Yes, you are. Yes, you are. Or you see it, we hear it, you're doing that. What you're doing now is so important, and that's not who you are anymore. That's who you were. And what you're doing now is so positive and so healing and good for the country and good for humanity. That's what's important. That's what we see. We don't see who you were. So who we were then is a lesson, is a teaching lesson for those of us that, at least for those of us that speak out. It's a lesson that we can use to help others. And let's not be hypocritical. Okay, so a lot of people didn't go into these movements like we did. Good, but they shouldn't act like they don't have some kind of skeletons in their closet, because every single one of us, unless you're the next best thing to Jesus Christ and you can walk on water and all that kind of stuff, every one of us has done some stupid things in our lives that we're not proud of. There's just some of us that are out here talking about it and trying to make it, better, and trying to repair some of the damage done from the past, rather than dwell on those things. And we own it, we own up to it. I'm not proud of my past. None of us are. But we use it as a teaching lesson. It's something that our little part we can do to help heal humanity.
Absolutely. One question, Captivision had a question. It was, what is the average age of people joining extremism, and are the majority young? And I know this is a really good question for our researcher. She is finding that more and more of them are getting recruited younger. But when you were involved, and even now, and doing the research that Beyond Barriers does, what is it that you're learning as far as like recruitment, and maybe not even just recruitment, but people getting involved in the extremism, as far as age range, or are the majority of them getting younger and younger, or what is it that you're seeing?
That really varies. I'd hate to put a number on that. We in the NSM years ago, we had like a Viking Youth Corps. There was a corps that was recruiting teenagers and things like that. And I put an end to that and said that they had to be, unless they were like children of members or something like that, and they had parental permission, they could get involved. But typically you had to be 18 to get involved in the NSM, but every group had different rules. A lot of groups you had to be 18, but there was some that didn't care about that sort of thing and would recruit younger. And you are seeing very young kids. There's an example, I believe it was out of Estonia, where there was a young man, I think it was Führerkrieg division.
Mm-hmm.
And this was one of the more radical radical organizations that was one of the few organizations that was kind of openly talking violence and things like that. And most of the groups that stayed fairly legal would look at those kind of groups and go, those are entrapment centers, or some being run by some kind of operative or something like that. But this is an interesting story because Fuhrer Krieg Division, there was news articles and things like that on it, and people were scared. It was a scary group,
Right.
they thought. Turns out it was a 14-year-old kid, 13 or 14-year-old kid out of Estonia, running it, operating the computer from his parents' home. So
Right.
I'm not laughing at it. It's just it's kind of crazy when you look at that. So for these online groups, you don't know who's who, and you could be trolled by anybody is saying that they're different things. But you do have younger and younger people that are looking into this stuff, that are getting involved, and I think that's a big problem, definitely in the country. But I wouldn't
You know,
say that there's just one age group that gets involved
right.
in this, because even in the organization that we came out of, it was from 18 to 90 years old. There was old people, there was middle-aged people, there was it was all age groups.
Actually, Universal Discourse, who is our lead researcher with Beyond Barriers, just put up in chat that currently in several countries, ages are running as low as 9 years old and going up from 9 years old, that people are becoming involved in extremism. So it's definitely getting younger and younger. And I'll put in my 2 cents on that one also, as far as a woman that was involved with extremism. And I know I've talked with you about this before and whatnot, but um, the children are where the future generations, that's where it continues. And um, that was what, like, I wasn't teaching my children this because they didn't know what I was involved in. Maybe I had a little bit of sense in my head at that time, I'm not sure. But anybody asks me nowadays, are women dangerous in the movement? And I say yes, because they're raising the next generation. They're raising the next generation to believe, and mothers teach their kids mainly what to believe, and they're home with the kids more, so they're instilling these ideologies in them. But thank you, Universal, for mentioning that. And then also, Cap also had another couple of things. He said he has been seeing a trend of mental states a lot tied with not thinking for oneself. A lot of times are getting involved in that, which I agree with, because sometimes, sometimes it's follow the leader or what your friends are involved with at that time. It can be a little bit of anything. He says, similar to high school students under pressure for thinking about your future and being sold into the military, it's the same kind of tactics. Um, and actually, along those lines, I was going to ask you about um, uh, tactics. Like, we've mentioned, pretty much anybody can become involved in an extremist organization. Um, what would you say some of the biggest tactics were that were used when you were involved, and even now today? What are some of the biggest tactics? I mean, is it more in your face, like, here, we're going to wave a swastika and we're going to do all that? Or is it more subtle, or not as subtle, I should say?
Well, that's not subtle at all, but
Well, you know what I mean.
um
I'm
the
stumbling
tactics.
over my words. Sorry.
No, you're okay. I just had to say it. The tactics are a really broad scale, as far as and it varies on groups. But as far as the NSM was concerned, the NSM was very, very good, or bad, I guess you should say. Very I don't like either of those words. Very skilled at propaganda.
Gotcha.
So putting out propaganda, whether it's street rallies, activism, flyering, which is really old school now, hardly anybody does it. Stickers,
It's coming
messaging
back.
things. What?
Sorry to say that, but no, it was very old school and it had faded out, but it is coming back with a vengeance.
Right. Well, I mean, especially with a lot of the censorship online and stuff like that, they're
Right.
having to find different ways. But social media was another tool. Music, the bands, and all the different genres of music, basically every genre you can think of. NSM had a record label, was involved in music production, merchandising, video games, video game development. Um, you name it. There was, I mean, basically podcasting, video messaging, things like that, all kinds of anything that you could think of to reach people. So, and it, the, and I won't share some of the tactics that were utilized, because I don't want, if there's people that are in these movement groups that are hearing exactly what we did, they could take those lessons and utilize them and propagandize more. So I'm not going to share all the details and things like that, but because I don't want to empower them, because I see a lot of the groups. There's certain ones that are very skilled at it, and there's other ones that don't know how to do that stuff. So I don't want to give out any tips that are going to help do
Understandable.
any of that, because I was very good at it. I knew how it worked, and I surrounded myself with all the talented people I could find that knew how to do those things within the group, and exploited those talents, unfortunately.
Another quick question. Cap was asking, you have some really good questions tonight, Cap Division, by the way. For somebody that was just telling me earlier today that I don't know how to articulate questions, he's come up with several very good ones.
Firing
So
away the
I
questions
know, it's
tonight,
awesome.
yeah.
So, what do you think the motives are of the older age group that are involved and that maybe are joining? Would you have an answer for that one? Or
What are their motives?
it says, what do you think the motives are of the older age group? Why take so long to join? Is it an ember that finally found some oxygen?
I see what he's saying. Well, the motivation is the same for whether I'd say young or old. But I think what he's wondering is, like, why would someone, say, in middle age or older, join that maybe didn't at a younger age? And a lot of times, and that is a good question, actually, because it takes a little bit of psychology to answer it. But a lot of times, for everybody, there's different people that join for different reasons. Sometimes it can be a trauma induced thing. It can be a bad experience. There was women that had came to us that were raped by a minority or something like that, a traumatic experience. um, or like a guy that was jumped on the street by a black gang, or something like that. And we would pinpoint those kind of things. Like, all right, well, now you're with us. You don't have to worry about those kind of things, and we're going to fight back. So, once again, it boils down to fear in a lot of cases. So, and other times it's that, just like the cult, just like a cult type of organization. You don't have to be 18 or young to join a cult. At some point in your life, you come across somebody that's the cult member, and they convince you that this is a good way to go, and you get involved in it. And for some people, it's a political issue. There was a lot of people that were coming to us, especially in the later years, when the group wasn't quite as rough around the edges, or uh, back in the 90s and the early 2000s. The NSM was like almost like a caricature of like the German movement, flying the German Nazi flags and all that kind of stuff. And that never really appealed to a large portion of Americans, because it seemed foreign to them. So after the first rebranding, when we were using the American symbolism and all that kind of stuff, the group skyrocketed in the numbers. Um, Today, in 2021, the organization now has went backwards from that, and is now very offensive again, and very over the top racist, like a caricature, like it was back in those days. So I don't see it growing much. I know it shrunk a lot After I walked away, a lot of people left, and a lot of people were leaving after that as well. I don't see it growing much because of those backwards tactics that they're using. But that's a good thing, I think.
Right.
But so I think anybody at any age group is susceptible. But where I was going with that was there was people that were contacting us, and this is after we got rid of all the German symbolism and we're using American symbolism and concentrating on specific issues like illegal immigration. There was people that were writing in and saying, I never thought I would write to the Nazis, but you guys are the only ones doing things on the border. And, that's what I'm concerned about is illegal immigration. So we were getting these one issue people that maybe didn't understand the anti-Semitism, didn't understand most of the things that the organization stood for. A lot of them would claim they weren't even racist, but they were getting involved because of one issue, like, for example, the illegal immigration thing. Now, there's a lot of other groups that are against illegal immigration that are not Nazis. So if, those are better to get involved in if somebody's
So if that's your issue, do
if
not
that's your
go
issue.
all the way.
Right.
That. Yes, correct.
You don't have to go to the extreme is what we're saying here.
Correct. Cap has another question. Do you think the movement has lost sight of its initial intended goal?
Are you sure Cap doesn't want to do the interview?
I think Cap should come in here.
I'm sorry.
He said.
What was that? Sorry, go ahead with the question.
No, you're okay. Do you think the movement has lost sight of its initial intended goal? Has it turned into let's be mad because we've been mad? Is it? Go ahead.
It's definitely a mad or angry movement. That's for sure. It really is. I've explained it before. Like, you wake up every day and you're literally at war with the world. Like, it's not just, and you're in the movement. A lot of people from the outside think, okay, well, they just like white people then if you're in the far right extremism. No, like any of the white people that are not on board with the organization, they're the enemy too. And in fact, most of the other groups, because these groups don't get along with each other, most of them are the enemies too. You would hear other white supremacists or white nationalist groups are the enemy for a lot of them. Even ones that were supposedly allies and would work together. A lot of times you'd hear like religious infighting or political infighting and be like, okay, well, after the Civil War or after the country falls apart and we take control, then we'll go get rid of the Christians, or then we'll go, or then the Christians will go get rid of the pagans, or things like that. I mean, that kind of stuff was so common. You would hear it all the time. And it, looking back, it just makes you wonder, like, why we didn't see these things, how dysfunctional that was, how backwards that was, and how groups like this, I mean, the fact that there's this fantasy or there's this belief that they could really come to power when they can't even get along amongst their own. I've even said, in fact, there was like an email leak back in, I don't know, the early 2000s or something. One of the unit leaders' computers got hacked or something. Some girl he was seeing outed his emails, and in those emails there was an email from me that said, I was telling the guy, the chapter leader, I was like, man, I said, be prepared for this. I said, running an organization like this and any kind of responsibility that you have now as a unit leader, you're going to be mom, dad, babysitter, social worker, psychiatrist, police officer, referee, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I know that email was going around online and people were like, look at Jeff Schoep talking about his own members. Like, there are a bunch of kids. And I think I said it was like the romper room, kids in the romper room. And it was like, yeah, I said that. I admitted it back then. Of course, that is how it is. That really, honestly, truly is how it is. And some groups more so than others, but there's a lot of infighting and stuff like that. So it's just not even a healthy environment for people to be involved in.
So one of the biggest issues facing America today is, how do we put it back together? I had this question posed to me by a really good friend, and I think it's something that you may or may not have the answer to, but it's something to think about. Like, we talk about extremism and the issue of extremism, and we've harped on there's all these issues and all these problems, but I think one of the biggest ones is, what do we do now? Now that we know, what do we do? How do we put it back together? Like, um, for starters, can we bring extremists back into the mainstream? Meaning, not can we bring them back into the mainstream light with their extremist views, but is it possible to reel them in from the extremes back to the non-extremes, the more center, I guess? I mean, you can still be on the left, you could still be on the right. You don't have to be centrist. It is possible. But is it possible to try and reel in those extremes?
Absolutely. We're doing it all the time. And once you get the individual to reconnect with their humanity and start seeing the world through the way it is, not through those you know, blinders where in the movement we would show people, we would always focus on the negative things, like showing videos from some of the really horrible crimes and things that were going on in South Africa, or isolated incidents across the United States, or racial violence and things like that. We would show those videos, and who wasn't going to get upset by watching those? Some of those videos I wish I would have never saw, because they're stuck in my head and to this day. Traumatic stuff, like people's heads being split open, and dying brain matter on the ground, and really bad stuff you can't unsee. So once you get out of those echo chambers or those bubbles, and you're not surrounded by that stuff, you're not hitting those seeing those messages, that we would utilize stuff like that to you know work up the individual, not in a sense to basically to solidify their oh, it's the word I'm looking for, but like solidify their commitment to the cause, to keep them angry and hard, and ready to fight, and stuff like that, because we were preparing for the breakdown of the country, for the country to break into a civil war or a race war or something like that, whatever it was. And it's not healthy. It's not and it's not real. It's not yes, those horrible things do happen, but it's not the way of the world. It's not the way most people are. There is those isolated incidents, and those people that are doing those kind of things, they need to be punished to the fullest extent of the law. I don't care what side of the planet you're on. Drop the hammer on those people, and they should never see the light of day again if they're murdering other people or putting harm to others, and things of that nature. The most extreme
Right.
examples. Um,
Now, how can we, you mentioned reconnecting with their humanity. How can you help somebody reconnect with their humanity? Like, what does that, and I know, people say it's a process and there's so much truth to that, but, you know, what can we do as just everyday average human beings, in our communities and stuff? How can you help people reconnect with their humanity? Is it possible for another person to help another reconnect with their humanity?
Absolutely. The way Daryl Davis reached me, and I didn't finish telling the story about Dia, and I'm going to try to keep it as short as possible. But meeting Dia Khan, also, I got to know her quite a bit over the course of, and this was again for the film White Right Meeting the Enemy, which, if anybody that hasn't seen it, see it. It's on YouTube. You can watch it for free now. It was gone offline for a while, but it's back on there. White Right Meeting the Enemy by Dia Khan. And you can see in that there's a scene in it, and this was on camera and off camera, but there's a scene in it where she's talking to me, and how she reconnected with my humanity. I'll just use this as an example, but we do this all the time at Beyond Barriers, and this is the method that Daryl Davis uses, Dia Khan uses, and it's similar to the method we used at Beyond Barriers, with storying and explaining things when I talk about reconnecting with humanity. And I should be more explanatory, but basically Dia was telling me about how, as a child, that racism and hate and confrontations with skinheads and people in where she grew up caused her to feel like less than a person, caused her to feel like she was hated and not pretty, and all these different things that were damaging to her. And she's sitting across from me explaining this to me and saying, this is what the ideology did to me as a person. And she was vulnerable, and I could feel it. I could see it in her face. I could feel it. I could, it was like a vibe or an energy in the air. I felt it. And that for me was the final straw. I didn't leave immediately from the movement then, but I knew that I mean, anybody that saw the film typically could say, oh boy, she got to him, and she did.
Mm-hmm.
And it was that, and it was similar to what Daryl did, but it affected me even more when Dia had done it, because I it didn't sit right with me. I've always been very like a protector of women and children and things like that. And when I saw that, it bothered me to the core. So one of the things that we do at Beyond Barriers is to, when I talk about reconnecting with humanity, and dehumanizing, rehumanizing, humanizing people in the movement, we dehumanized entire segments of the population, and a lot of the population dehumanizes people that are in the movement as well. Oh, they're a bunch of bigots and racists and terrorists and scum and blah blah blah. It doesn't work reaching people like that. You have to reconnect them with their humanity. You have to talk, you have to have dialogue, you have to be able to, go back and forth. And sometimes when you're sitting down with these people, or if you're trying to connect with them, you might hear some ugly things and some things you don't want to hear that are uncomfortable, and especially for people from other races, like when Daryl and Dia meeting people and hearing that takes an incredible human being to be able to sit through that kind of stuff. For some of us that have been there, done that, or whatever, it's not as difficult because we were there before. But to listen to them, respect is a big part of this too. So when you've listened to them spew their 5 minutes of garbage or whatever it is, and you said, okay, now I've listened, now do I have my turn? Can I talk now? A reciprocal conversation. Yes, they have to respect you and hear your point of view now too. So that's the time that you have to be able to insert different alternative ways of looking at things, different points of view, different questions for them that they, to ponder, or things to think about. And even if they're defensive, or saying wrong things, you don't know. You might be planting a seed there, like the seeds that were planted for me that I didn't even let on. I mean, with Dia, you could see it in my face, but with Daryl, I didn't let on that he had gotten to me at that point. So you don't know necessarily if that seed's being planted. You can't expect the person to just snap their fingers and be like, you know what, I'm out of the movement. I'm leaving. There's cases that it's happened like that, where it's been one incident and that's it, and they're done. But typically it's a process, and it takes time, and it's not something that happens overnight. I was de-radicalizing for a couple of years and didn't even know it before I left. So, and some people take many years. Other people can do it in a few months. Everybody's different. The human brain is incredible thing, and you can't put a label on it and slap it in a box.
Hold on 1 second. One thing also, I got a couple more questions and then we'll be wrapping it up here. I appreciate you. I know it's going a little bit longer than what I had planned on, but we've had like a lot of really, really, really good questions. Cap asked, is Jeff constantly working on this conversation?
No, I just jumped on. I just jumped on for the broadcast and started
these conversations.
He's throwing
if you
so many
haven't noticed,
curveballs.
Cap, he likes to have fun and he likes to joke around. So you're good. Okay. Yeah. No. Are you constantly working on these conversations, like these kind of conversations with people, and having? I think that if I missed that, Cap, let me know. But
on like this kind of dialogue and
on these conversations,
yes, absolutely. I mean, we're today, just today as an example, I mean, it's been what, 11
Hmm.
hours of this without a break, literally, except to eat lunch. Yeah.
Yeah, he said it seems tiring. Like it can be tiring.
It can be, but it's for a good cause, like, it's not for everybody, and you do what you can. And the most important thing is especially for people that are doing this kind of stuff, because it is, a lot of it is heavy, and you're dealing with a lot of heavy things. You have to be able to manage it. And that's one of the reasons that uh I know all my examples are from a lot of my examples are from the past, from the movement, unfortunately. But lasting 25 years as the national leader in an organization like that is no easy task either. And one of the things that I learned in that high stress environment is, when you feel like you're going to burn out, or when you feel like, and this goes for anything, I'm not talking about that time period, because it's the same process I use now. Um, when you're at that moment where you're feeling like, what, I'm under so much stress, I need to just put this away. That's when the phone goes off, the switch on the phone goes off. I'm not taking any calls. And if you need to play video games, if you need to go for a walk in the woods, if you need to go ride your bicycle, or walk the dog, whatever it is you do, go out with a couple girls, all these kind of things, you know do it. You gotta
Yep.
make that time for yourself. You've got to step away. Anybody that's just working nonstop all the time, you'll burn out. You will burn out. And you have to find that happy balance, that fine balance. And you got to make time for yourself. You got to make time for your loved ones and the people around you. And balance is the answer to
He
that.
says, "My hat's off to you guys. It's a lot of work to change the perspective of people." And then he also goes, "All work and no play makes Jack a dull boy."
Thank you. Right on.
Um, Real quick, also, TM Garrett had a comment on Facebook here, and I'm going to put it up here, and I think it's a really, really good one. And it's something I think you would agree with. If you want to be at service for your people, being at war with everybody else, being at war with the world is the biggest disservice you could do. It's only about fear and hate. You think you can only survive if you win over the others rather than getting along. Extremists are never good diplomats. Don't fall for it.
Good one. Thank you for that, TM. That is right. That is right on. Um, yeah.
Um, And then real quick here, last two questions here. Unless Cap has any more, I told Cap he's coming on my next coffee and a conversation. Like there's just no doubt about this. Like I think this is the most I have ever seen him talk in my chat, and it's awesome. But aside from that, um, what role can politicians play in bringing extremists back to the mainstream? Like we hear a lot on both sides, actually. Of rhetoric and how it can, and I know you and I have talked about this, how it can exacerbate the situation and actually make extremists, I guess you could say. What role, so my question to you is, what role can politicians play in bringing extremists back to the center or
Well,
from the extreme?
I think with the politicians, I think they'd have a hard time doing the work that we do, because I don't think they understand it, and that's part of the problem, is they don't really
Well,
understand the work. But what they can do to make things better,
that would be the
and not
question, yes.
feed the beast, so to speak, is by not echoing some of these extreme things, or not engaging in some of these extreme behaviors. And at Beyond Barriers, we're a nonprofit 501c3. We're nonpartisan. I know there's other organizations out there, and different people will say, will side with the right or side with the left. I think that's we try to steer clear of that kind of thing. Of course, all of our individual members have their own, fairly moderate political opinions on different things, and that's okay to have those in your personal life. We're not here to, uh, control what people think, but we've got politicians right now in this country that are doing some pretty extreme things. There was, and I'm not going to name any names, but there was trials and things going on, and you had certain politicians out there before the juries were out, calling for things that they shouldn't be calling for. And there was people in 2020 that were encouraging rioting and things like that. Politicians, elected officials calling for things like that. There was blue checkmark people on Twitter that are supposed to be social media influencers and politicians and government in different areas of the government talking about burning the country down. I mean, we saved some of those screenshots just to have them for reference later on. Like, these were so-called responsible people saying these kind of things. That's extremist propaganda. That's like literally some of those things. I could think of so many people. I could think of a woman that considers herself a former and a counter-extremism expert that was saying that the American flag is a symbol of white supremacy and hate, and that we need to burn this country down. You telling me that ain't an extremist? That's somebody that's on the extreme still. And that's just one example. And there's tons of them. We were saving screenshots of some of this stuff just because it was so bizarre that they were saying this stuff in public, and is so irresponsible. So if these are our elected officials, and not all those people I just mentioned were elected officials, but some of them were, and we saw some of it that was going on because we monitor this stuff. We listen to the chatter for the far right and the far left and religious extremism. We keep track of this stuff. Not constantly all the time, but we do monitor it. It is one of the things that we do. And when you're seeing more mainstream people taking up extremist rhetoric, and we're seeing a lot of times the media amplifying those things. So there's got to be personal responsibility. We talk about personal responsibility for making up and repairing the damage done from our past and fixing things and trying to get humanity to come together and come back together, and having empathy, having compassion, talking to one another, having that communication. And we're seeing when our politicians do things like that, what we got to do is not reelect those people. Remember who they are and do not vote for them. I don't care if it's across party lines, if you got to go to the voting booth and vote for a different party, or write in Mickey Mouse. Those people should not be reelected, period, if they're doing that kind of thing. If that's okay, if it's okay to talk about burning this country down or doing things like that or amplifying those kind of messages, it's no different than the Ku Klux Klan. It's no different than the NSM. It's no different than some of the far left extremists that are actually out there doing the burnings and stuff like that. If that's the kind of messaging you want, you should not be in office. Not in this country. Absolutely not. So there has to be personal responsibility. And if we can do it as former extremists and take responsibility for our past and try to make up for it and make it better, they can do it too. So they need to fix that first, fix themselves. And I'm not tarring and feathering all the politicians, because there's a lot of really good people that are trying to make a really good difference. So I don't want to focus on the negative, but in those cases where there is some politicians that are doing very negative things and causing divisions in this country, they should be called out for it. Absolutely. And we should not reelect them.
And actually, my next question was going to be what role for the media? And I think you kind of covered that some also. It kind of goes for the same, look at what rhetoric you're saying and, call it out on both sides for what it is. You can't just call it out on one side. Now,
that's important too. That's important too. The hypocrisy, because I've seen a lot of this, and this is one thing that really bothers me about the industry and the work that we do, is there's a lot of focus on the far right, rightfully so. The far right has killed more people, has done more things like that. But there's been a lot of focus on the far right. And some of the people that are focusing and saying these things are far left extremists, and then vice versa. That there's people on the far right that'll say, oh, the far left is so bad, they're doing all these things, but then they don't look in their own backyards. That's the hypocrisy. Yeah, that's where I'm saying, I don't care if you're on the right or the left. I've got friends on the right and the left, but not extremists. But if you're so you can be anywhere, and you can be center, you can be right, you can be left. It's all okay. Don't be an extremist. Don't be talking about burning our country down, and don't be talking about killing minorities or white power or this kind of stuff over on the right. Don't be doing either one of those things, because you're an enemy of this country if you're doing that. So you can't be a counter-extremism expert or working in counter-extremism if you're amplifying one extreme or the other. It's just like saying, you know what, I'm going to go be like ISIS, but Al-Qaeda's bad. Yeah,
Right.
it's just so stupid. And so that's a problem. And there is, it's like, and I'll call out the media on this one because this is a really good example. And everybody and their mama knows this one. I think it was CNN. Kenosha was burning down. It was in flames. There was a whole block behind in flames. And the reporter goes on the news. And this is why people talk about fake news and stuff like that. That reporter went on the news and he said, in Kenosha, we've got fiery, but mostly peaceful protests. And then the whole car dealership on fire behind him and flames 3 stories high. The average American is looking at that and going, and everybody, that was memed into the next century because it was fiery and mostly peaceful protests. Like, that makes people think that the news is lying. I don't care who you are. You see that video, whether no matter what side you're on, you see that video and you go, what in the heck am I looking at? What did I just watch? And then you go, you know what? Maybe the news is lying to me. So let's be honest with this stuff. Okay. And I'm not even going into that. I'm not saying that there wasn't peaceful protests because we know most of the protests were peaceful. So I'm not throwing conspiracy theories out here. I'm just saying, don't fricking lie. Don't lie. Don't say it's peaceful when everything behind you is burning in flames, because now people don't believe you. It's dishonest. So that's my message on that. I just don't like lying. I don't like it.
Right. I don't either. And lies tend to perpetuate more lies, and then by the end of it, you don't even know what the truth is anymore. And it's just it's strange, but there is hope. I mean, we're working on it every day. And we are going to wrap it up. As much as I don't want to wrap it up, I mean, this conversation has been amazing tonight. So I thank you very much for joining me. And then last but not least, for anybody that would like to continue the conversation and would like to have any more questions, research related as far as extremism is concerned, please go check out can't talk. Go check out Universal Discourse. I'll give her a shout out right now. She actually is streaming right now. She did a co-stream with me, and she will be around to talk more about the research involved with extremism and the research that Beyond Barriers is doing right now. And so please go check her out. If you're on Twitch, it's Universal Discourse, all one word. I just gave her a shout out, so you guys can do that. Thank you again, Jeff, for joining me, and I appreciate it very much. And good luck with everything. If last thoughts that you would like to leave everybody with tonight?
Yes, absolutely. The last stuff I was talking about was kind of negative, so I want to close out on a positive note. The work we are doing at Beyond Barriers is phenomenal. We are changing lives and saving lives. I want to thank Universal Discourse as well for restreaming this, and our wonderful research department. Some of the best people. We're getting to the bottom of this stuff. We're not just talking about it. We're going to back it up with facts and the research from the research division. And we're changing lives all the time. And as I had said on the event earlier today as well, you cannot put a price tag on the human life. For every life that we save or every life that we change at Beyond Barriers, it's like a ripple effect. It's like a trickle down effect. It's like a snowball rolling down a hill and creating an avalanche. You don't know how many people's lives we're touching in the process. You save one life, it affects that whole family. You off ramp somebody that was going to go and do a mass shooting or something like that. How many lives have been affected in a positive way because that one person was off ramped and didn't harm all those innocent people? We don't want to see any more mass shootings. We don't want to see any more mass killings in this country. We don't want to see that negative stuff. Humanity is worth saving, and we can do it. And each one of you out there can do your part. You can all do something to make this a better world. Don't think just because, you know, you're at home or you weren't involved in this stuff that you can't do something. We all can do something. We can all be a little bit better. We can all work a little bit harder. We can all try a little bit harder. We can be nicer to our neighbors. We can meet somebody new and be kind to them. Show little acts of kindness in everything that you do. Pay it forward. Do good things. Do positive things. You don't know whose life you're affecting or who you're touching in that manner, and you can do it. Everybody can. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a great evening, guys, and we will see you next week.